Here's Shed. Off the window, no. Roberts tried to get it. Shed for the win. Got it. Jamal Shed plays the hero again.
Back to pass. Donovan Smith. Smith steps up in the pocket, unloads it, throws it all the way downfield into the end zone. Tipped, and it is caught. Caught by the Cougars. Caught for a touchdown. Unbelievable. Caught by Stephon Johnson.
Stick it in your pipe and smoke it, baby. Yes!
Welcome to the Scott Holma Podcast. Back here on the first Tuesday of November. Nothing else of note, more important happening right now as Bobby and I sit here in the evening, other than our desire to recap a top 25 Houston Cougar football win. Cougar men's basketball blessedly coming back into our lives, and just a heaping helping of Cougar stuff to talk about. We're going to even find some time to talk about a non-Cougar specific, but very much related to U of H topic here. Bobby, at the risk of taking any more time than I have to away from the Coug talk, the stuff that you and I and everyone else listening are here for, how you doing, friend?
I'm wonderful, man. It's work is about to hit the proverbial S show, but it's a good one. We got a big customer that we're rolling out, and so the next 3 weeks will be me driving around all suburbs and inner city of Dallas Fort Worth and visiting stores. So super excited for that. But other than that, ready to talk some Cougar sports.
Heck yeah, getting those miles in, buddy. Got to mention, of course, speaking of a group of people have been productive, it's us, the Scott Holma Podcast. In the premium feed, we have had 2 premium episodes for you if you were someone that financially supports our show. In the past week, you got our, obviously, K-State Instant React football episode. We've been dropping those since the start of last season, but you got the first of what will be very many Cougar men's basketball React podcasts specific to the premium feed. I talked for 28 minutes about Houston versus Jackson State. Going to do that for every game. I'm guaranteeing certain times, but if you want bespoke podcasts, if you want more Cougar content in your life, in addition to just supporting what Bobby and I do here, patreon.com/SHPAWDcast, as little as 16 cents a day, you can support the work that we do and get an additional hour plus of bonus content every week in addition to this podcast. It'll always be free 99, will always be available to y'all on this feed. That's patreon.com/SHPodcast, SHPAWDcast. And I'm going to mention them because I haven't mentioned them in a while. Our friends at the 1012 Network, TEN12 Network. Bobby, Houston Cougar football has arrived such that in the first 10 minutes of this week's 1012 Mothership podcast, Cougar football got mentioned. We have truly arrived in this world, which I think is cool. In addition to the 1012 podcast, which fantastic stuff there, a number of other school-specific podcasts, including our friend Scott at Bosco's Boys, who we went on his show and he came on our show. If you listened last week, you certainly heard him. Check them out on everywhere you social media at TEN12 Network, Twitter, Blue Sky, etc. Bobby, I think that's all the housekeeping I'm going to do this week. Let's talk K-State. Let's talk that top 25 upset by your Cougar football program. We're smiling here because this is something we're really, really excited to talk about. We're really, really excited to, one more time, go on the premium feed and talk about that as well. But obviously plenty to talk about here in our regular spot. You know this. I mentioned this to you and Dustin, our 3, the co-host, present, and emeritus group chat. I went back and listened on my drive home yesterday, and partly while I cooked dinner, our 2023 podcast talking about that season's Houston K-State game and what the 3 of us at the time thought about that one. To me, it's almost unthinkable that in just over 12 months' time, we're talking about a Houston Cougar football team against the same opponent who, unless they lose out the remainder of their schedule in the regular season, is likely to be having a significantly similar 2024 season to the previous one. It's almost beyond comprehension to me that we're talking about Cougar performance this different. We're talking about Cougar winning against an opponent who beat us 41-0 last year. Even coming into this game, no Cougar fan or clued in outside observer, should have needed that much evidence even before this one kicked off that Willie Fritz and the staff and the actual team, obviously, were going to do more in this current season than I think the very modest preseason expectations. I think we already had shown enough through the 8 games prior to this one that, hey, this is going to be a better team, not a perfect team, but this is going to be a better team, a team that plays harder, et cetera, et cetera. This game should clinch it for anyone who is harboring any kind of doubt, who's on the fence. This program is going to win again. This program is going to win again under this head coach. This program will eventually become one that gives a good account of itself on a regular basis in the Big 12. It's not out of the question, but not a sure thing, that this team is going to even have enough wins to go bowling this year, literally years before we expect. That's on the table still on November 5th. The game itself is worth being excited about just for the game itself. It's worth being excited about for the big picture implications that I've kind of just talked about a little bit here. It's just been an awesome few days to be a Coug, Bobby. How are you feeling about this one? And whenever you're ready, feel free to dive in like we always do at the top here of your 3 overlooked plays from this utterly fantastic 24-19 win over the Kansas State Wildcats.
Man, it's hard to feel bad, right? This was just what a great moment it felt like, just kind of watching this game when Zion breaks his run to put the Cougs up. It kind of felt surreal. You were kind of just lulled into this sense of okay, this game's going okay. We're still in it, but you're not overly excited. I was more happy of how we looked in the game. I still, even at that point, didn't think a win was going to happen, right? That's just me being 100% honest here, just kind of watching it going, okay, we looked pretty good. There were at times after the first Cougar drive and the first K-State drive, you got the stop there. But that first Cougar drive, I remember texting you going, all right, this already doesn't look like it's going to go very well for us. They drove it down, even though we held them to 3. It just didn't feel like there was a lot there. And then the offense stalls out pretty quick. And you're just kind of feeling like, man, this isn't great. And then you go into halftime and you're feeling pretty good there. They come out. And another time I text you and I said, okay, now it's looking like their depth is starting to kind of reign supreme. Their talent and their depth is just kind of showing out because they were moving the ball easy on this defense. And then all of a sudden they just kept stalling out. And the defense kept standing on their head and the offense was moving the ball. Nothing too crazy, but we weren't having to punt from deep inside our own zone or our side of the field. We weren't giving them good field position. We were driving the ball. We were doing some good stuff, and we were playing a decent field position game with them. And you kind of just, up until that Zion Chris run, you were just kind of like, all right, this is fine. Yeah, we're doing all right. Yeah, okay, oh, cool. And then Zion Chris breaks off that run, and you go, oh, we're winning. And we're not just like hanging in this. We got a shot at this, and we have a legit shot. We got to make a couple of stops, and we win. And then we did, and it was crazy, man. But, I watched West Virginia last year. I was nervous up until I saw that ball land in at the end of the game. So that's not to say that once Zion Chris scored, I was like, oh, yeah, this game's over. It was not like that at all. So kind of my 3 plays. We'll just kind of start with Dylan Edwards running for a loss of 6 on a first down. He goes for a read option. This is late in the first quarter. K-State's backed up on the 17. They get the loss of 6. End up having to punt from the 9. Flips field position. Cougs go down and score on the next drive. That's the man jack 4th down touchdown. If you don't get that stop there, if you don't get that 6, that loss of 6, you're punting from the 17, maybe you're punting from the 18, 19, somewhere in there. What does field position look like there? Do you even go for it on 4th down if you're the Cougs on the next drive, based on where you'd be on the field at that point? You know what I mean? So I think that was a really big play that we might overlook, right? You see the field position and that kind of stuff, but the actual bad read and then Dylan Edwards just getting stopped was a great moment there. The next one for me is the blocked PAT. It kept U of H in the lead. K-State's next drive is a touchdown. 16-10 feels way different than 17-10. I can't really explain why, but it just kind of does. You're in a 3-possession game either way, but a 3-possession where you're tied, or guaranteed 3 possessions, or 1-possession game, where you're in a 1-possession game and it's like, oh, if we go down and we score a touchdown, we're tied, versus if we go down, we get a touchdown, we have the lead. That feels different. I know it doesn't seem like a lot, but that just kind of was also a thing that just kind of showed how this game was going to go. You had another special teams blunder by Kansas State later in the game. It just kind of felt like K-State was a little sloppy, maybe looking ahead to their off week. Isn't their off week this week, I believe, or the week after?
So, yeah, I believe so. I believe they have an off week this week and then Farmageddon with Iowa State.
So it just felt like they were looking ahead to the off week and Farmageddon, and it just they just looked like they were going to play sloppy, and that was the first real sign that you got of that. And then my final play is with 10:04 left in the third quarter. It's third down. Cougs are down by 6. Cougs tackle Avery Johnson for a loss of 5 on a 3rd and 1. If they pick that up, does it turn into a K-State runaway win? Right? Cougs are down by 6. They pick up the first down there. Do they get going? Do they start driving down the field if they pick that up? Maybe, right? And then from there, you're down 13. I don't know if this team is built to come back from down 13 points. So I think the loss of 5 there, it could have been a loss of 1. It could have been a stop and no gain. I don't think the amount of the loss matters, but I do think that getting off the field there, granted the next possession for the Cougs was also a punt, but it just felt like if K-State picks that up, they start to see a lot of momentum, and the Cougars are in trouble.
So I opened my 3 plays with a special teams play in a game where U of H, I think, was the far better team, far more composed when it came to special teams in a game of fine margins. I feel like the Cougs almost won the game on that margin, but this was one moment in the game where I think the Cougs weren't made to pay for not doing their best on special teams. This was probably Liam Doherty, your punter, who had a fantastic game on the whole, averaged over 43.5 yards per punt. His one short punt that wasn't obviously situational, it was when K-State was up 16-10. K-State, just on their side of midfield, around there, muffs the punt, has to go backwards and start on their own 39. And this was when they were up 16-10. In a game of fine margins, because it's 16-10. This was the drive that ended with that botched field goal. Like, it was supposed to be 53 yards there. Either way, like, you wonder if they start a little closer to midfield, are you feeling a little bit better? It's a very psychological game. Does this opponent have a little bit more confidence? And does this possession become the one where K-State goes up 2 scores? And I agree with you, granted it was with regards to a different play, that this is probably not a team that was capable of coming back from down 2 touchdowns against K-State. Yes, you were down 2 scores at one point, but if you're down 23-10, I think at that point in the game, it becomes an entirely different ball game, and I don't know if the Cougs are able to come back and win this one in the way they did. That K-State didn't make you pay there like you kind of did whenever K-State had its various special teams gaffes or imperfect performances over this game. That's why I put it there, because keeping it at 1 score there, keeping it just at the margins that it ended up actually being at, was very important this one, as the Cougars scored the final 2 touchdowns and got their comeback. My second one, and I don't want to be predictable every week. I don't want to just always pick the play before a big play, but on the possession immediately following that Jeremiah Wilson interception, the return inside K-State's 10, obviously you're in a very advantageous position on that 3rd and 1 to run the kind of QB run fake pop pass play the Cougars ultimately ran successfully for the touchdown to cut the lead to 19-17. You're only in that spot because of a second down run by your true freshman running back, DJ Butler. He gets you 5 yards. It was a good play design. It wasn't just all DJ Butler creating something out of nothing, but it was a nice play there that gave you 3rd and goal from the 1. Because even if you have like 3rd and goal from the 2.5, 3 yard line, I'm not sure you can run that play. I'm not sure. Maybe you do, but I feel like the fact that you had in that goal line situation and had K-State's defense in a spot where they had to basically sell out for the run, that they couldn't do what they needed to do to even be prepared for the possibility that he would do something like a boot rollout or some kind of run fake to a pass, which they ultimately did end up running for the touchdown. So I picked that play because oftentimes you don't see the play before the play and recognize its impact and the fact that you were able to be in a position where you have a luxury on a short down distance to go. Even if it's a later down, like 3rd and 4th, you could still do a whole lot more in a short yardage than even a couple yards further from the end zone. Your opponents to sell out to do a lot different stuff because it's so much easier to get that 1 yard versus a 3 yard run in that situation. So my 3rd and final play falls more into the general category of I thought this play was cool while watching the game in real time, though I think it did have some significance at a key juncture of the game as well. Our premium subscribers might remember me mentioning this play in our instant react. This was on the last K-State possession when they were still holding the lead, 19-17. This was in the first play. Avery Johnson looks like he's going to take off, but Michael Batten does a fantastic job closing ground really quickly, brings Johnson down for a 1 yard loss. I guess it shouldn't be that surprising. It was one of those plays that made me like in real time, like, oh, dude, do a positive double take. Like, wow, he really closed that ground faster than I thought. In retrospect, probably shouldn't have been that surprising. Like, this guy started his football career. This guy's most prominent football career prior to going to the college level was as a running quarterback. That he's probably a better athlete than you think when you see him now, you see his build now as a linebacker. Like, remember this guy was a run first quarterback at one point. So like different skill set than you might think when you just look at Michael Batten and maybe don't know his backstory. But obviously, first and foremost, have it on here because it was a cool play that I wanted to make sure just got mentioned on this pod. But it did also get K-State behind schedule on possession where they certainly would have loved nothing more than to slowly bleed clock and to hang on to that 19-17 lead that they had at the time and ultimately weren't able to hold on to. So those were our 3 plays. Let's get to the game itself, Bobby, if you are ready for it.
I'm ready, buddy. Let's go.
I'm going to start with the Cougar defense this week, if you'll allow me. It's been a good enough regular season that you could find multiple games where you could make some kind of compelling case for this was the defense's best performance. TCU, for all of TCU's flaws as a team, the fact that you held TCU to 19 points, I still think that's a really fantastic performance on the road when you really needed it. In that one, that was really good complimentary football. Bobby, do you agree with me, and regardless of whether or not you agree with me, do you think this was the best performance of the season? And also, what did you see from the Cougar defense from Saturday's game that you'd want to talk about here?
Yeah, I would say it is probably the best performance of the season for the Cougs. And that's simply because K-State's offense is so good. K-State, according to SP Plus, I want to say had the number 27 offense in the country coming into this game. I think I'm in the
Sounds
ballpark.
right.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm 100% correct on that. I'll be honest, just kind of riffing off the top of my head there. But I absolutely do believe that this was the best performance by the Cougar defense. It's really hard to explain how good it was. This K-State offense is just that good, right? They're really, 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 really good. Just some fun things that I kind of noticed, or that I took stat wise. I know you're not the biggest counting stats fan, but this was their second lowest point total of the season. Avery Johnson's 18 rushing yards was his third lowest rushing total on the year. His total yardage was the fourth lowest. You got him to throw 2 interceptions, which is tied for the highest amount of interceptions. I'm going to shout him out here in a minute, but that one by Michael Batten is just
so good.
To make that play is to swivel the hips as a linebacker to make that play was just absolutely incredible. Got him to throw those 2 picks. DJ Giddens, he's been really good for K-State this year. DJ Giddens has been a solid running back for them. His 50 yards is the lowest for him on the season. That's pretty good. This K-State team before this loss was competing for a playoff spot. This wasn't some run-of-the-mill team. This is a legitimate offense that this Cougar defense kind of got out there and just held them. Just an absolute crazy performance by the Cougs. And like I said, I want to give Michael Batten his flowers. What a performance. Got that massive interception. But a play that might be, again, could be an overlooked play is when K-State, for some reason, fields the punt at like the 1-2 yard line.
That was Dylan Edwards. Yeah. I actually didn't notice that until I watched this, or I didn't remember it until I watched the cinematic recap of all things.
Yeah, and he gets it at the 1 or 2. And look who's there to make the play. Michael Batten down on the field. Makes the play, makes the tackle. Open field tackle. What else can you ask for out of your defensive player? An interception. He goes down, he makes a key tackle on special teams. He seems to be, his nose is in every play. When you look up, there he is. You got to give him his flowers. Another guy who just kept popping up on the screen. Just... you would hear his name and you'd be like, oh, okay. AJ Halsey. What a play. What a performance by AJ Halsey as well. You seem to, I didn't write down how many tackles he had, but it seemed like he was in on every tackle on the game. So that's kind of what I thought of the defense, just to kind of put in context how good of a performance this was. This K-State offense is a really good offense. Avery Johnson, despite him being a sophomore, you were one of the few teams this year, maybe besides BYU, who made him look like a sophomore. You're one of two that made him look like a true sophomore. And that's impressive. That's impressive no matter who you're playing. That's impressive no matter what your defense has looked like all year. That's a performance you should be happy about.
Yeah, this is, other than this in the BYU game, there hasn't been a game all season where Avery Johnson didn't positively affect the game for K-State with either his arm or calling his own number in the run game, or, like it's happened oftentimes, both. I'm glad you led with Michael Batten, because I don't think any individual player, and there's a lot of good individuals from this one. Hershey McLaurin is one that I think is also worth name checking, along with Halsey and Batten, who had probably have 2 and 1 respectively in terms of who had mentioned first from the individual performances in this one. McLaurin continues to be a breath of fresh air in terms of what he does as a defensive back, who's able to play in the run, who's able to make plays behind the line of scrimmage, which you could apply all that to Halsey as well. But to have a couple of really strong fifth-year guys who are good, tough dudes come into this defense, like Batten, like McLaurin, it's been a godsend. No exaggeration what those two guys have been able to bring you. And I think one team stat that's really kind of deceptive from this one is that the Cougar defense had 0 sacks. And that's in part because Avery Johnson is such a good runner, such a mobile quarterback, and he had some narrow misses. Probably most memorable, the Brandon Mack one, where he was like a half second late, maybe not even a half second late. What ended up being K-State's longest offensive play of the game, 61-yard pass play from Avery Johnson to Jace Brown, his top receiver. That was on the drive where K-State ended up getting a field goal to go up 19-10. You had a lot of near misses in the pass rush, but still I think did a good job at times making Avery Johnson not feel too comfortable in the pocket. And it was a tough task because you can't get too aggressive, because this is a quarterback who could really beat you in the run game. You send too many guys, leave open space. You have something like what you saw on Zion Chris's ultimately game-winning touchdown run. You had to account for him in the run game, but also didn't want to give him forever to throw the ball. Though I think there were some times where U of H dropped 7 and 8 and did a really good job, despite Avery Johnson having a lot of time to throw, keeping him from ever making a game-changing play with his arm. This game, I think, was one of the best examples of the 2024 defense doing something way better than any of the past couple defenses did. Containing a mobile quarterback, not letting him change the game with his feet. And there's no perfect 100% foolproof game plan for an opponent who's as talented as Avery Johnson. If you rewatch this one, you can find instances where Johnson picks up a first down with his legs or in some way affects it positively. And you can kind of tell the Cougar defense is trying not to let him get beat running the ball. And QB hurries are also related to this, kind of a subjective and depending on whether your team's the home team or visiting team kind of stat, which isn't to say anything bad about all the official scores out there. Kind of a roundabout way of me saying, I don't think the U of H season sack total right now being 12 through 9 games is truly reflective of this defense's ability to get after an opposing quarterback. And this was your best tackling game as well. And there's competition, but also worth remembering 2 games against Kansas, probably your worst tackling game of the 2024 season. And your most recent game before this one against Utah, much improved, but you did have a couple glaring examples against Utah of poor tackling, including the first touchdown in that game. Once that one was done, though, the game before this one, I think you saw, okay, like this team seemed to have gotten whatever out of its system it needed to get out of its system from the Kansas game, which is just a truly objectionable defensive performance. I think my biggest 30,000-foot takeaway from the defense from this game, actually really from defense, offense, special teams, is that you finally had, and this side of the ball was the best example of it, good performances back-to-back weeks. You were able to handle success because this program over the last several seasons has really been plagued. And it's not just a Daniel Holderson thing. It's not just a Major Applewhite thing. Spanning multiple coaches in many years, this program has been plagued by an inability to string good performances together over an extended period of time. We talked about in the Premium React, it had been almost 24 months since this program won back-to-back games. And I know you had the long winning streak 3 seasons ago in 2021 where you played 11 varying degrees of not very good football team. Don't know if I really count that so much. And that's why I'm so giddy that we've now seen U of H beat two Big 12 opponents who are at least very good at one facet of the game. And in K-State's case, I think very much both facets of the game. What I wouldn't give Bobby, back to what we talked about at the beginning, Michael Batten, him having one more year of eligibility, but that guy's going to go down as one of the most impactful one-year Cougar athletes we've ever seen come through Colin Boulevard. Yeah. He's in the class, and I don't compare people. I don't compare athletes to these other sport athletes. Likely, I'd put him in the class of Kenneth Sauer of Cougar volleyball, or go back Josh Carlton, Tajay Moore of men's basketball, Hershey McLaurin as well. Can't say enough good things about him. And this all shows you the on and off field impact of bringing in veteran guys like Batten, like McLaurin, Brown, Carlos Allen, Keith Cooper, and also adding them to guys who are willing to buy in, like the McCutcheon brothers, Latrell and Travion, Jamal Morris, AJ Halsey, Anthony Holmes Jr. And shout out to also sport of the show, Dennis, for this nugget. I think what makes the Cougar defense performance extra impressive, they did all this, Bobby, while facing 23 more plays, the Cougar defense, than their K-State counterparts. And still, despite going against 75 plays, which is a lot, that is a pretty high tempo opposing offense, only allowing 4.4 yards per play. Like that's real good. You can only, and it's a testament, I think, also not just to the guys on this defense, but somebody we haven't talked about on here in a while, the work of your first year strength and conditioning coach, Kurt Hester, who came over the Fritz from Tulane and was one of those hires that we knew the moment it became official was going to be a really important one for the staff. I have a quick special teams thought too, Bobby, if you will allow me, since we usually talk about
how about it, buddy?
Special teams together. Cool. One of the things I wondered to myself earlier this year when the Cougar special teams play was downright fucking terrible, most of the weeks that we played, was what is this team's ceiling if it improves from being one of the worst performing special teams units in the country? Like, how much does improving the margins there improve the overall practice team? It's not only going to be there because it takes offensive improvement. It takes everything. It's not going to exclusively come from special teams. I still had some faith, though, that special teams play wouldn't be as terrible the rest of the season, because you have someone like Willie Fritz who places a big emphasis on it. And also, it was one of those situations where it almost couldn't get worse. This game for me was a full circle moment now, further into the season, of that special teams turnaround, going against a program in K-State that prides itself on special teams from the many years of Bill Snyder being the head coach there. I've seen K-State fans refer to themselves unironically, and I think not incorrectly, as special teams U. Bobby, U of H won this game by having better special teams in the game.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you really look at it, the punting was better. The just all specialty. You had the bad choice to return the ball from the 2 or the 1. It's, just those little things you don't think about, but 4 points swing on a botched hold and a blocked PAT. Not even to begin to talk about the field position that was flipped when he fielded that punt poorly. So there's a lot. Those little things you tend to not want to think about special teams. What's the old adage? If you don't know your long snapper's name, that's the best, or your holder's name. I was listening to 1012 Networks, one of our sister podcasts or brother podcasts, whatever you want to call them, Bosco's Boys. They're the K-State podcast. And he probably spent 10 minutes talking about their special teams and how bad it was. And you just kind of sit there and you're like, yeah, that's the difference in a game like this. If you're going to create an upset, there's little things that have to happen for it to work. You got to be a little lucky. And I'm not saying the Cougs were very lucky or something like that and they didn't deserve to win. Cougs deserve to win this game, no doubt. But those little things are the things that make a difference in an upset like this.
Not so many positives to talk about offensively, but also a game that was won with help from the offense, with a better overall effort in this one offensively than we were seeing at the absolute nadir of that unit's performance earlier this season. UH doesn't win this game without timely and opportunistic offense. And 2 more scoring drives in the first half than you had the entirety of the 2023 game. Just exercise that for my soul, Bobby. So not all positive, but also not all negative when it comes to the Cougar offense. what do you think is worth talking about, good and bad, from the Cougar offensive effort in this one?
Yeah, the kind of first thought is this offense good or is it pretty? No, it's not. 11 pass attempts is absolutely crazy, especially as a U of H fan. 11 pass attempts. 11 pass attempts. That's insane.
That's like it's like 1.5 drives in the old Kingsbury and Holgerson offense.
Yeah, exactly.
15 years ago.
But hold on, let me give Zion some flowers here. Let me give him his flowers. If you're only going to throw it 11 times, it's good when you complete all 11. But all of that being said, we asked for a competent offense to go along with this defense. All year we've been saying, hey, if we just had a functional defense or a functional offense, if the offense was just even okay, we'd be able to compete in some of these games and maybe win some of these games. Sam, that's what we saw. We got what we asked for. We got a competent offense. Was it good? Was it pretty? No, it wasn't beautiful, but it's what the team needed. We also said that this team would be better in November than it was in September. This offense would be better in November than it was September. And here's the thing. It is. The offense still has some warts, but I don't want to kind of shit on a side that is doing a good enough job. They're doing what we kind of asked and what we needed from them this year. I said this K-State defense was good, but it did allow some points, and we saw that. Right? You could have a big play against them. We saw that multiple times in this game. Cougs forced some turnovers and actually took advantage of it. That's not something that we've seen a lot this year, or capitalizing on good field position. This offense did that. So I'm happy with the progress. I think the question that I posed last week, what does Zion have to do to get you to not worry about a quarterback in the portal? I don't think he's there yet. But I'd like to see him throw the ball downfield a little bit more. That's a concerning aspect of this offense. But again, has nothing to do with this game, but this offense, you'd like to see the ball go downfield just a couple of times. But look, if Zion Chris and the offensive line, or if the offensive line is going to block like that, and Zion Chris is going to bust off, 50-yard runs, shit, I don't care. Don't throw it deep. I don't care.
I'm not going to rubber stamp every play call or say I loved every minute of when the Cougar offense was in the field in this one. We'll just say, like you, we've been crying for an offense that's functional and sometimes gives you a chance to win games. I think we've got it. And you've had to face two extremely good defenses these past 2 weeks. Going pass first or pass heavy would have been a much worse idea. Could we have mixed in a few more passes? Yeah, sure. Like I could be talked into that, but I don't think a drastically different game plan would have led to anything other than a worse result in one or both of these games. If I had my druthers, like I said, Cougar offense would have passed it maybe a few more times, but emphasis on a few, because we're still talking about a game where, despite only attempting 11 passes, Zion Chris was sacked 4 times, and those well under 20, I think, dropbacks. His O-line has struggled pass blocking against the better defensive fronts like this K-State one, who we knew coming in was really good at getting to opposing quarterbacks. The only way to have kept Zion Chris from being sacked a comically high number of times was, unfortunately, if you're a Cougar fan who didn't love the game plan, being kind of run first, being frustratingly conservative at times. Not saying you can't get better here and there, not saying I loved every play call. I know this fan base, present company included, has been spoiled for creative and unique offenses over the years. Right now, this team just needs an offense that doesn't make the defense's life much harder. Mm-hmm. And that was largely, but not entirely, the case on Saturday. You did have the Chris sack fumble late in the second quarter that gave K-State the ball in U of H territory in a drive where the Wildcats got a touchdown in the lead going to halftime. At the time, certainly felt like kind of the worst case scenario. Previous game against Utah, you also gave them an even shorter field on an interception where one of your running backs mishandled a mostly on-target pass. So it's not all there yet. Don't misunderstand me on that. This offense hasn't entirely succeeded in keeping the defense from having to defend an almost impossibly short field at least once a game, but it's getting better. More often than not, this offense is at least not actively handicapping the Cougs' overall ability to win games. That's the comically low bar this offense has to clear right now. Just periodically break big game-changing plays. Definite check mark on that from this game. Avoid back-breaking turnovers. Partial check there. You did have one, though you were positive on turnover differential for the game, which I think was massive. And more subtle, even on the empty possessions, trying to avoid the quick 3 and out, giving your defense any chance to rest a bit more, giving your defense any chance to defend in a better position. Your punter can pin the opponent back, that you're not putting your defense in a situation where your opponent has the ball 36, 37 minutes of the game and your defense just gets completely gassed and route to losing the game, because maybe a few more you're possibly a few more 3 and outs away in this one from the dam potentially breaking for K-State. Wanted to highlight some individual performances as well before we get done talking about the offense. Joseph Manjack, for the second game in a row, only had the one reception, but also for the second game in a row, really changed the game in a positive way with that one reception. A quick aside, we've kind of alluded to not loving every play call in this one. Loved the pop pass, obviously, to Malik Carr for the touchdown to cut it to 2. Really loved the 4th and short play action boot, which was it was a nice enough throw by Chris on it as well for the big gain to Manjack, which ultimately set you up for the first touchdown of the game. Would love to get him more involved. Would love to get Malik Carr more involved, but glad to see Manjack really change the game with that one reception that he did get. Hoping against opponents that are slightly less fearsome, you get a bit more from the passing game and you allow Joseph Manjack to continue changing the game in a positive way. Also had the trick pass to Zion Chris in the drive that ended with the Jack Martin chip shot field goal. And this game was another one where we saw a freshman running back, this time a guy we haven't talked about as much, DJ Butler, be involved in a positive way for the offense. I mentioned him in the overlooked play. Also had a 28-yard run to get the offense into K-State territory. Fortunately, it was on the drive that ended with the Zion Chris sack fumble late in the first half. But at that point, it was giving you a chance to potentially steal some points before the half. And it's so cool that we have talked about 3 different freshman running backs this year who have been positive difference makers for the Cougs. That is an embarrassment of riches. That is, and you don't assume necessarily roster continuity as much in this day and age, but you keep 3 or even 2 of those 3 guys around 2 years, man, this is going to be a fearsome run offense to go with, I think, a better culture in the defensive side of the ball. Also wanted to shout out another first-year Coug, Devin Williams, who had a big 33-yard reception on that same drive that ended with the Jack Martin chip shot field goal. Want to shout him out as well, playing a bigger role with some other guys absent this year. Not a perfect or even aesthetically pleasing offensive performance, but you also weren't ever going to be able to do that against this K-State defense. You could say whatever you want about this offense being ugly. The only way that you were going to win this game was by winning ugly. The only way really right now you can beat quality opponents is by winning ugly. And I'm glad at the end of the day that we won ugly. And I think the next 2 games are going to be the test of how this offense handles 2 opponents who aren't nearly as tough on defense as Utah and K-State. That's its own unique challenge. The offense has had some stinkers this season against teams with not the strongest defensive resumes. Cincy shut you out. Kansas 3 games ago now really, really kicked your butt. And I don't know if that was something we were expecting. It was probably one of the worst defenses you faced. So I guess my last thought, Bobby, pass this back to you for any last thoughts you might have. Contrasting this year's performance in the 2023 one, like I kind of talked about at the very beginning of this segment, is so incredible. Like last year, you had the Cougs getting shut out, and that abysmal offensive performance I masked an even potentially more abysmal defensive performance, or roughly as abysmal defensive performance. Not the same group of guys out there for K-State, obviously, but a lot of key guys who played in that one last year were back. Avery Johnson wasn't the primary starting quarterback in that one. That was Will Howard, but Johnson played a decent amount. DJ Giddens had almost 7.5 yards per carry in last year's game. Didn't even get 3 on Saturday. The defense had 2 interceptions last day. So 2 interceptions on Saturday against K-State. Bobby, K-State barely had more than 2 incomplete passes all of last year's game. I could go on and on about the differences. I think for me, the biggest difference is how much better this year's group did at handling success. I mean, it's not a perfect comparison, but last year's K-State game, if you remember, was off the heels of that emotional, much closer than expected loss to the Longhorns. And you saw a team basically come out flat in that one from the jump. You're coming off an emotional, if not so pretty win against Utah. Handle that success by going in and getting your highest ranked opponent win since 2017. Like that's pretty cool. Like that's what encourages me the most. That you beat them this season by playing Houston Cougar football. Not the most pretty brand of football, but it doesn't need to be. Damn the style points if we're finally fucking winning football games. And that's what I'm just so excited to talk about with you.
Yeah, that's it, right? It just feels different. I've been saying that all year. This feels like a different, the vibes around this team just feel different than what they were last year. Everything just feels better. You see you hardly ever saw a video of the previous administration going absolutely wild with their team in the locker room. You saw that a lot with the guy who left us and went to Texas. Not to give that guy as much attention as we'd like, but that was a fun season, man. We can try and deny it all we want to. 15 and the first half of 16 before he started shopping himself around. Those were fun.
Oh, yeah,
fun
I don't
years.
think anyone should deny those seasons were so fucking fun, man.
And one of the things that made that season great was seeing the videos coming out of the locker room where they're singing the fight song while holding the giant Texas flag. You had the moments where they were playing F up some commas and everyone is losing their mind in the locker room, and you see those videos come out. Then you see the two administrations between that and where we currently sit, and there just wasn't that, right? Like, you saw Holgorsen celebrate a little bit, but it was mainly Holgorsen celebrating at his house, just him being himself. You didn't see a lot of the cool shit in the locker room. And after this game, we've been seeing Willie Fritz do his crowd surfing Willie, which is so much fun. But a video came out, and I sent it to you, where he had the whole team doing this chant. And it ended with, "If you ain't Coug, you ain't shit." And you saw the guys go absolutely insane. They look like they are ready to run through a wall for that guy. You and I joked, like, you knew after this game, because all Willie Fritz does is football, that he was going to be home in bed by 10:30. And I was like, no, he's going wild. He's going to have a beer while he watches a late night game, while he watches Rice versus Navy down in, like, the den, the theater room that they have, where he's got a clicker and he'll be watching it. Like, that's what he's going to do for fun. Like, it just seems like a different feeling around this team.
A lot more fun to talk about, in my biased opinion.
Yes.
All right, Bobby, you ready to talk about something not this game, but related to this game?
Sure, man. Let's go.
We will update our season head-to-head pick'em, down with a pickness, no Cougar football game from the week to come to pick games on, but we'll have a quick recap of where the two of us stand for the 2024 season. I went 2-0 for my picks from the K-State game. I took the total under of 46.5 points scored with 50 pod bucks, and U of H to win straight up the money line at 4-1 payout. Both of those were successful. Bobby went 1-1, also taking the under of 46.5, and also K-State minus 13, which was unsuccessful. So yours truly is now currently holding a lead of 1,376 pod bucks to Bobby's just under 1092. I don't believe in talking before the season's finished, and I certainly won't stop making 2 or 3 picks per week. I'm not just gonna be like, I'm sitting out this week. I'm gonna say, like, no, I have honor. I want to win this the right way if I'm going to win it. We'll still be doing that, but you can blame me if I feel pretty decent about my chances here, man.
Hey, look, all this means is that you have to take Cougar money line going forward. Like, you have no other option.
We'll see about that.
Yeah, have fun with the BYU game.
With Arizona.
Yeah.
Real quick, also, I alluded to at the very top of the episode, we had a non-Cougar topic, but very much related one. We're going to talk a little Big 12 football since we do not have a Cougar football game to preview. We have the two of us made a decision to scale back on our general Big 12 football talk last year, not because it's not something we follow, not because it's something we're not very much interested in as it relates to U of H, as it relates to the larger big picture stuff going on in this conference, but it's for the sake of time. These episodes have been short on content, even without really doing much in the way of talking general Big 12. So we thought with no Cougar football game to preview it, this week was an ideal time to kind of catch up on what's going on an absolutely crazy season in the Big 12, the first season with the current 16 team alignment. I'll throw it to you, Bobby, but what's so crazy, K-State is the only team from the preseason top 5 of the conference poll that has actually played like a team in contention for the Big 12 title. The other four, Utah, Arizona, Kansas, Oklahoma State, those are all teams right now who are going to be, quite frankly, not sure things to be bowl eligible. I think at most two of those teams gets bowl eligible when it's all said and done this year. You have the opposite side of that. Preseason dead last Arizona State is bowl eligible with 4 games left to play. Preseason number 14, Cincy's 1 win away with number left to go. And probably bearing the lead, oh no big deal, BYU, the preseason 13th has 16, is 8-0 and absolutely in the driver's seat to be in Arlington to play for the Big 12 title game. Bobby, a lot of right answers to this question. What have been the most interesting things for you to follow, and who do you think, what team, for good or bad reasons, has had the most interesting 2024 season so far?
I mean, for me, the answer is BYU. BYU has just had such an amazing run with wins over really good teams, right? And they're not just beating teams, they're putting the smackdown on some teams. But then you see their game versus Oklahoma State, right? And they win by 3 to a bad Oklahoma State team at home. But then you take a Kansas State team that's pretty good and you beat them by 29. You go on. Yeah, you absolutely just destroy them. You go on the road, you beat a top, just missing the playoff as of tonight. They were the last one out, SMU team. I'm not sure if you saw that before we got on. Couldn't happen to a better fan base. But you go in, you come into Dallas and you win that game. You beat Wyoming. I mean, but then you play Oklahoma State close. Like I said, this team just feels like somebody's going to trip them up. I don't know where it comes from, though. Does Utah do it? Maybe it's a rivalry game. You kind of don't know what's going to happen there. Doesn't look like Kansas is going to be the team to do it. Arizona State might. Arizona State, to your point, ahead of schedule. And then they play us. We travel to them. I don't know about that one. As a Cougar fan, you got to kind of be honest. Who trips them up along the way? I think the bigger question for them is who are they going to play in Arlington? I think it's going to be BYU. They can afford a loss. And then the Clones, Colorado, you have 4 teams in the top 20 in the Big 12. And there's a chance that this conference doesn't get one of the top 4 buys. There's a chance because it's the 4 highest conference champions. And this conference is just beating each other up. Everyone is just beating each other up. I don't know if you've ever seen, I know you have, the wonderful circle of sucks that always happen. This feels like an opportunity in the Big 12 where we are going to complete the circle when BYU inevitably gets beat by somebody.
Yeah, BYU is one of the more incredible stories in all of college football this year, much less the Big 12. I don't think they go to the end of November unscathed, though I don't think UH is a team that does it. I don't think 2 teams get them between now and when they play in Arlington.
Yeah,
I feel pretty comfortable about that. Like, yes, they had the performance against Oklahoma State that wasn't the best, but even really good teams have uncharacteristic, like, closer than you would expect wins. Like, you gotta find a way to win your clunkers, and they have beaten some good opponents very decisively. Like, it's gonna be a team that is gonna be very hard to beat. Like, sometimes BYU catches lightning in a bottle. It's kind of an every 3 or 4 years thing. I know the COVID season was weird, but they were very much one of those teams in the 2020 season, Zach Wilson's final season in college. So curious how their last month of the year goes. I went for the negative interesting in mine. And for once I actually telegraphed it to you, I think you probably know where I'm going with this. Mike Gundy in Oklahoma State. After having kind of a weird start to last year, they finished that year really strong. Ollie Gordon has one of the best seasons of any back or receiver, any player, period, in the country. They make the Big 12 title game, lose to UT Austin, but like when it was all said and done last year, I think really changed the narrative more than any team in the country from the preseason to the end of the season. Went into the year as a not crazy pick to be one of the better teams in the Big 12, and they've been bad. Like Ollie Gordon hasn't run the ball well, and Mike Gundy's tried to say, well, it's because teams are stacking the box against him, which is one of those things that holds up from a narrative sense, but like there's enough info out there now about coverages and pretty easy to refute that. No, it's not because he's getting stacked boxes against him. though I'm sure the fact that they don't have a really good quarterback taking the pressure off him probably doesn't help. But no, it's just bad run blocking. They're having their worst defensive season since he's took over as head coach almost 20 years ago. It's just a really bad time. He's a coach who's really seemed unhappy with the modern game in terms of NIL and stuff. He's a guy who would be, I think, probably one of the least surprising, just I'm quitting because I'm sick of this shit kind of coach. And that's kind of what I'm watching here in the last month, because they're winless in Big 12 play. Right? This isn't like, oh, well, they're a little disappointing. They're 5-4, 4-5, and have lost some close ones. They're 3-6. They haven't won in Big 12 play, and they're coming off just getting physically beaten badly by Arizona State. And Arizona State's much better than expected. Arizona State has one of the best running backs in the country, Cam Scatterbo. This is not me taking any kind of shot at Arizona State, but the fact that Oklahoma State's been this bad, and I'm not saying like Mike Gundy deserves to get fired necessarily. I mean, this would be his first losing season in so many, since maybe his first year, even before he started. Like he has been so absurdly consistent and successful there that I don't think hot seat's the right word for it, but he's going to probably have to, after I think maybe staving off making any changes last year with the way they finished the year, he's probably going to have to make coordinator changes, plural. And it might be one of those where he looks at it at the end of this month and just says, no, I'm good. I'm unbelievably rich. I can make some money talking about it. He's good in front of a microphone. Like I think his most recent press conference, this is not an example of him being good in front of the microphone, but he's an entertaining character. But like at one of the more recent press conferences, he talked about the people criticizing him probably can't pay their own bills and stuff. Just, brother, stop putting your foot in your mouth about this stuff. He's not going to stop putting his foot in his mouth about this stuff. No. So I'm very curious. Do they have one more absolutely crazy, just unexpected, like, oh, they figured something out and are able to finish the season 6-6? I think even then you're still talking the coordinator changes, or do they just completely skid into the end of the year 3-9? And again, don't think he's being a hot seat. Don't think he should be on a hot seat. What kind of changes do they have to make? That's something interesting to watch. And I think it's kind of crazy. It tells you how many interesting teams, interesting stories there are in this league that neither of us, and I think with defensible cases for both of us, picked Colorado, this team that, yes, they have gotten way too much hype cumulatively since Deion Sanders got there, but they're genuinely a good football team this year. They're genuinely a team in Big 12 title contention. And we didn't pick that because there's so many other good and bad, positive or negative, interesting stories from this league. Has it been good for getting you a team in the playoff stress-free? No, it is not. This league has cannibalized itself something fierce. But if you like an interesting league where nobody is a sure thing to win week in, week out for the most part, this one's been good. And as somebody who, I don't know, maybe am not as concerned about the playoff, like I think I've been able to enjoy that while not having too much stress about like, oh, are we getting a top 4 seed or something like that?
Yeah, I think what is, kind of fun about it is we have said this. We said this last year, and we said this kind of going forward with this conference, is that it's not going to be the SEC where the top teams are the top teams in the country. But what it is every game you got to worry. Everyone's pretty close in this conference. There's some bad teams in this conference, but I would say the bottom of the Big 12 is better than the bottom of the SEC. Is better than the bottom of the Big 10. Now, their tops are way better than our top, right? Would I love to see BYU have to travel to Oregon? Probably not. But I wouldn't mind the conference chances of an Oklahoma State versus a Purdue, right? I think Oklahoma State, while they're not good, probably beats Purdue, right? Who's the worst team in the SEC off the top of your head?
Ooh.
Normally you'd say Vandy, but you can't say that this year.
Definitely not Vandy this year.
It's not South Carolina.
I think Mississippi State.
Yeah, Mississippi State.
Maybe Auburn. One of those.
Would you say Mississippi State would definitely beat Oak State?
No.
No. In fact, on a neutral site, I'd say Oklahoma State probably opens that game favored.
I would agree.
So that's what makes this conference fun. Are we a conference where you're going to have the top two and you're guaranteed a bye and all that? No, but every game in this conference is a fun watch.
Fully agree. Bobby, you know what else is a fun watch? As you inadvertently set me up for a
Boom,
brilliantly
let's
smooth
go.
segue.
I know exactly where you're going with this. Hit me, buddy.
Cougar men's basketball, who is back in our lives, started their season last night with a resounding 97-40 win over Jackson State. We're going to talk about that, talk about a big game this coming weekend against the Auburn Tigers as they come to Houston and play the Cougs at the Toyota Center. We'll start with Jackson State. My biggest overarching thought about this one, Bobby, this team accomplished 100% of what we would have wanted to see prior to this game. Didn't have to play the starters any more than the minimum amount of minutes. Got extended looks at guys who the two of us were probably a little bit less certain of, what they were going to be this year, i.e. not LJ Cryer, Emmanuel Sharp, or Jalen Roberts. So obviously you saw a lot of good stuff from that trio of guys. Where do you want to start with this one, Bobby?
I am going to start with just some overall thoughts and then just kind of work in my other thoughts. Going into the game, like you said, you didn't think you'd see too much, but what I did want to see is how Uzan looked. And you got to say 8.7 boards, 10 assists, and 4 steals. That's a pretty damn good debut there, Sam. Seeing a rotation go 11 deep is also really exciting. That's something I kind of talked about in preseason, is that this team, we want to see its depth. We want to see, because was its Achilles heel last year. You got a couple of injuries and you were kind of screwed. I mean, not that I'm like, oh man, we can totally get, 2 guys hurt and we'll still have a 9-man rotation. Like, I'd prefer if we didn't and we had 11 the whole year, but you have a little bit of margin there when you go 11 deep. Super exciting to see Mercy Miller getting 14 minutes. I think he's going to get a good amount of playing time this year based on the scrimmage in this game. Granted, again, I know it's Jackson State, but if you're playing in 14 minutes in a game versus Jackson State, you think that he's going to give you 5-10 minutes in an important Big 12 game, in my opinion. When some of your starters are getting more minutes, 10 minutes for Mercy Miller to give some of your guys a break that's a big deal, especially late in March and things like that. So, the depth is the thing that I'm watching throughout this season and how it plays, and can we make it to March as healthy as possible. Seeing Mercy Miller, seeing some of that going 11 deep kind of answers the question a little bit, but it is going to be interesting to see where we go from here.
Fully agree. For me, and you also, the biggest job of anyone who talks about this game is to try and separate what the Cougars did because of the quality of Jackson State and what is a real takeaway. But there's still plenty of real takeaways. LJ Cryer was already figuring out how his offensive game fits into the team over the back half of last season. You saw that get a lot better from the start of the previous year, and obviously improving drastically in the non-scoring parts of his overall game in that season. The LJ Cryer we saw last night looked like an even more confident player offensively. It looked like a guy who's ready to be one of this team's leaders. The player I'm most trying not to get over my skis about, ridiculously overhyped about, is Miles Uzan. My hope was that he would come into this team and benefit by not having to take on as much of the scoring load as he did when he was at Oklahoma. That would allow him to flourish more as a distributor, creator for guys like Sharp, Cryer, Roberts, Arsenault, Mercy Miller as well outside of that starting group. So you have to acknowledge the level of opponent, and I don't expect every Miles Uzan game to look like this one. The fact that he tied his college assists career high in one game played got to be a positive sign, right?
Absolutely.
Like, he's not Jamal Shed, because nobody is going to come in here and replace Jamal Shed, but he can absolutely be a guy who slashes to the basket to create, to do the defensive and rebounding work that Kelvin Sampson is going to ask out of his guards. We're going to see a lot this season. That's my prediction of Uzan to Wani Roberts, and I'm so excited for every bit of it. Like that we got to see an extended look at JoJo Tugler. He's still, I think, showing some of the rust from his offseason injury rehab, not being able to go through all of the offseason work that a lot of his teammates went through, but he made life absolutely miserable for his opposing number, Jackson State's Shannon Grant, who had 4 turnovers for the game, got to 4 fouls by extremely early in the second half as well. Also really excited about Terrence Arsenault. And I think along with Uzan, the two guys I'm having to most keep myself from getting completely overhyped and just being so excited about what I saw from this one game of him in the current season in terms of how confident Arsenault looked offensively. I don't know if there's a bigger difference year on year in terms of confidence from the last time we saw him play versus now as to any of the returning guys on this roster. And it makes sense because most of what we've seen from Arsenault, most of what we remember about Terrence Arsenault was when he was playing as a freshman. And even the most highly touted freshmen are going to have some degree of college learning curve. We only got a little bit of him last season before his season-ending injury. If this game is even somewhat representative of what we're going to see from him this year, Terrence Arsenault, guy who right now I'm not sure can even break into your starting five, this is going to be a nasty basketball team to deal with if you're someone who has U of H on the schedule. And I don't know if this is a big picture takeaway yet, but my hope from this one game and from what we talked about in the preseason is that Malik Wilson and Ramon Walker Jr., they looked more comfortable and confident out there, especially offensively in this one, that continues because both guys looked a lot better offensively. And I kind of wish casted when we previewed the season that those guys having played all of last season, you see that impact this year, that you see them look like more confident players. And also, I'm pretty glad that Kelvin Sampson and the staff made the decision not to risk Javier Francis by playing him in this one while he's still recovering from a groin injury. Those are such finicky injuries, those in hamstrings. We'd all really hate to see any subsequent re-injury. And it allowed the staff to get, I think, really valuable extended looks at Tugler, at Said Lot, in a game where, quite honestly, you didn't need a minute of Francis to win it by 57 points to cover the absurd spread that this game had in the pregame by over 20. I think if the staff had truth serum, I'm sure they wish Jacob McFarland hadn't gotten hurt last week and that you could have gotten an extended look at him in this one because it seemed like one where you'd give him his first long college look. Also, no big takeaway, but Said Lot getting the steal and breakaway dunk is going to be one of my favorite plays of the season. I know it's one game in, we have a lot to go, but you could see how excited he was. You could see how excited his teammates were too. It feels like the basketball equivalent of when a D lineman gets a fumble recovery touchdown.
Right.
I love it.
Yeah, it's just great game by the Cougs. Nothing to dive too deep into. If you need that super deep analysis, premium content from Sam there.
Exactly. Got to talk about Saturday's game as well. The Auburn Tigers coming to the Bayou City to the Toyota Center to take on the Cougs in the Battleground 2K24 Mattress Firm, whatever it is, back-to-back games with Rice, Florida State, and Houston. Houston versus Auburn. Bobby's putting his head in his hands because he saw our women's basketball game go final. We'll talk about that in a later segment on this here podcast. We don't have a game of Auburn, the preseason number 11, to look at right now in the current season. They'll be one of the later teams to start. They're opening their current season tomorrow at home against the always salty mid-major, the Vermont Catamounts. What have you been able to find out about the Tigers, Bobby, and what do you want to see from the Cougs in this one?
Yeah, it's going to be you're playing a very, very tough Auburn team. Preseason, I want to say number 11. The big guy you're going to have to deal with is going to be their Cinder Broom. He's one of those guys who we're going to have a big guy battle this weekend. How's Wani going to do against him? That's a huge thing. This Cougar team plays physical, and you can get away with a little bit more when you play the Cougs in terms of physicality. We saw it in the Jackson State game, right, where a couple of elbows got thrown, and maybe they got away with it a little bit more than they probably should have. But when it's the battle of the big guys, I like what Wani can do against him. I like what we saw from Wani in Jackson State. But that's basically what this game's going to be, what it's going to go down to is the big man battle. You also have transfer from them, JP Pegwest. Did I say that right? I couldn't find the pronunciation. Piggies.
I had to find a video of guys breaking down the incoming transfers because I didn't get the pronunciation guy from his last school or Auburn. Sorry.
Yeah, he's coming over from Furman. You may remember a couple of years ago, Furman hit a game winner over Virginia. was something I saw a bunch of people reference. Went back and watched it. He was the guy who hit that shot, but averaged 18, 4, and 5 at the guard position. Granted, it was at a lower level mid-major conference in the SoCon, but those are still numbers that you're going to have to deal with. And how does Milo Suzan handle him on this weekend going forward? So that's kind of what I'm looking at. You kind of look at Auburn's Denver Jones, came over from FIU a couple of years ago. Can put the ball in the bucket as well, and can hit his 3-pointers. I think what I saw was it was somewhere in the 40s. I want to say 40, 41, 42, somewhere in there from 3-point land. So if JP starts driving to the hole and he can kick it out to Denver, we could be in a little bit of trouble. But, one of the good things about the Cougs is the Cougs are able to get their hands up, play strong defense. So it's going to be fun. It's going to be an interesting game. It's kind of it feels like a styles make matchups kind of game. What do you see, Sam?
I mean, no exaggeration. The first guy you mentioned, Janai Broom, might be the best big man U of H sees this entire season. And that's not a swipe at the remaining opponents. You're going to see a lot of really good big men this year. That's just how good he is. He was first team All-ACC last season, preseason first team coming into the season. I think could be a Wooden Award guy if he has the senior season. He could. I think they're X Factor, a guy who I don't know if you mentioned. I'm sorry if you missed it, and not saying it's a miss on your part because I don't think he's guaranteed to play a huge role in this game, though I think he could, because Auburn's Achilles heel, such as they've had one the last 2 seasons to differing degrees. They were much better at this last season than the season before when they were just absolutely terrible, but they've struggled at times shooting from deep, and they brought in a super senior transfer from Georgia Tech, Miles Kelly, who's a good shooter, was honorable mention All ACC last year for a Georgia Tech team that was way ahead of schedule. Last year was 4 of 8 from deep in their preseason exhibition against FAU. JP Pegues, who you mentioned, March Madness legend from 2 tournaments ago now, 2-time first team All SoCon selection. I'm really curious about how their head coach Bruce Pearl manages Pegues, who's obviously a veteran point guard who you want to get on the floor a lot, and Tahad Pettiford, an incoming freshman they had, was the number 29 recruit by 247 in the current freshman class, 5-star by some recruiting services. This will be a second college game, and U of H is a heck of a trial by fire for any new guard, no matter how talented, but he's a good one. And I think Pettiford and Pegues are going to be good test for USAN, good test for the Cougar guards. Now, your first really tough opponent without Jamal Shed. So curious about all that stuff. This is definitely, to break out one of our old favorite cliches that goes back many seasons of this podcast, this is any margin of win is acceptable kind of game, even playing in a de facto home environment like Toyota Center. And just on a personal note, I'm going to be very excited to take this one in person. I'm going to be traveling to Houston on Thursday and staying for several days. We'll be seeing this one with my father and host Emeritus Dustin, which I am very excited about.
As you should be.
Big one. Obviously, I prefer the U of H Fertitta Center games, but I think it's still going to be a really good atmosphere there for this one at the Toyota Center. Like the A&M one was like that last year. I expect something very similar in this game to come. So if you don't have any thoughts, Bobby, we'll continue talking about Cougar sports that had very good weeks. Talk about the Cougar volleyball program who played one match in the past week. Finally, at long last, won a game where they lost won a match, where they lost the first set, dropped a really tough one to Cincy, but ultimately won that one 3-1. And I thought, to the Cougars' credit, they had to deal with some of the things that they've really struggled with this year. They had an opponent, because they dominated the second set after winning, after losing a really close one in the first set. They're up 24-18 in the third set at one point. And Cincy won 6 straight potential Cougar set points before the Cougars finally got an Avery Shemitis kill to take the lead and ultimately win that one. Very, very stressful Cougar fan experience, which has been kind of part and parcel of the current volleyball season. But I also think it's important for this roster full of younger, potentially returning players to figure out how to keep fighting, to figure out how to win when your opponent doesn't go away quietly, because they very rarely will in this conference and against the kind of schedule that David Herrera and the staff like to schedule. And eventually, from these learning experiences, from the pain points becoming a bit more clinical and figuring out how to win a bit easier. Cougs also had to fight off an early deficit in the fourth and final set trailing as much as 12-8 before retaking the lead halfway through and ultimately only needing 2 match points to put that one away to give this team its second straight Big 12 win. Good win, not an unexpected win, but you were getting Cincy at a high point confidence-wise. They just had a 3-0 win over UCF. You're finally back to 500 in Big 12 play. Bobby, what do you want to mention from this one?
Yeah, the big thing to your point was doing things that you've kind of struggled with in on the season, and that third set is a key example of that. You only hit 192 in the third set, but you had the defense to make up for it. You kept Cincinnati hitting only 159. So even though you weren't playing your best offensive volleyball there, you were able to get over there, make them hit a lower percentage, and actually come away with the win here. Once again, need to shout out Kate Georgiadis, 31 digs. Annie Cook, 45 assists on the evening. So good games as expected from those two.
Crazy good offensive performance from Katie Corelli. Maybe the best combination of volume and efficiency we're going to see this year. The 18 kills and hitting an eye-popping 600. Second straight game of Ashlyn Bellamy, your freshman outside hitter, setting a career high for kills, was only behind Corelli. Hit a respectable 265 for the match as well. 31 digs from Kate Georgiadis, who rightfully earned another Big 12 Defensive Player of the Week honors for this performance. Coming up, the Cougars will play twice this coming week. They'll be on the road tomorrow night, probably tonight if you're listening, or a little bit after, at Iowa State for a rematch of that extremely close win, a 3-2 win through Fertitta Center last month. We'll return home on Saturday afternoon to face Texas Tech for the first time this season. Won't say a lot with the Iowa State match since they'll probably be done or in progress or close to in progress by the time you're listening. But Iowa State has struggled somewhat since the last time the Cougars faced them, but they also just got through a brutal stretch of Big 12 volleyball opponents, because that's frankly the level of difficulty this conference is. You will sometimes have stretches. The Cougars are about to get into one after this week where you don't have anything close to an easy match. The Texas Tech, a little more, I think, winnable one. The Cougars should expect to win at least at the friendly confines of their home court. The Lady Raiders, are 4-7 in Big 12 play. By no means are a walkover, but one the Cougs should probably win. And if this team could come out of this week 7-5, that's going to be major, because as I alluded to a second ago, the schedule is going to be an absolutely brutal finish to November. So just give yourself the best chance to be around 500 and in the middle of the conference in Big 12 play. I think you need to go 2-0 this week, though. Certainly not a guarantee.
Yeah, I think that Texas Tech game is going to be pretty difficult. Just kind of going through the schedule and looking at some of their stats. They're pretty close to where you are. You'd like to think you're a better team than them, but you kind of look at some of the results and you go, yeah, we're pretty close here. With it being in the friendly confines of the Fertitta Center, you'd hope to walk away with a dub here, but don't be surprised if this one goes 5 or is 4 really tough ones versus Texas Tech.
Bobby, kind of a different kind of tough, but you know what's going to be kind of tough to talk about?
What's that, buddy?
Cougar women's basketball started their season tonight.
Yeah, they did.
In fact, about
they
2 hours
did,
ago. We're doing it's about 9
Sam.
Central right now, 7 where I am. Cougars lost their opener to UT Rio Grande Valley 70-68 at the Fertitta Center.
Did you see the final play?
No, I have not seen the final. Bobby, I've been so focused on doing this podcast and giving our listeners.
I pulled up the stream when I saw it was 66-66. So UT RGV hits a 3 to go up by 2. Cougs go down with about 3 seconds left. Put up the shot. Don't beat the buzzer. Ball goes in. Cougs lose 70-68.
It's not great.
No. To be fair, Layla Blair was out with a did we see concussion protocol? Yeah.
We were told
concussion
for
protocol.
that one.
So you want to say that like your best player was out, but also that's like saying, Wani was out versus Jackson State. You'd still like to think that you beat Jackson State.
Yeah, we're playing Georgia on Friday. Like if Layla Blair's not in that game and whatever, you're not that competitive with Georgia. It's like, okay, well, you didn't have Layla Blair for it. You'd like to think, because UTRG, like I know sometimes randomly it's like, oh wow, UTRGV is really good at women's basketball. Did my research, Bobby? No, that's not the case. They have been a bottom half of the Southland / WAC team these last several seasons.
Sam, I just want to say this, like, I don't feel that we should ever lose to UTRGV in any sport.
Fully agree.
Like, resources wise, we should just be better than them at everything.
Yeah, it's like randomly really. If they were randomly like, if they have one sport, they're like, okay, like whatever. We just have
like Sam Houston was with baseball there for a while. Yeah. Remember when Sam Houston, and they still kind of are, but not to the level that they were, where the game versus Sam Houston was always a big one because they were grabbing a lot of talent from the Houston area that was kind of overlooked. And those games would be kind of close, but U of H would typically win them. That's how I feel about UTRGV if they were, but they're not.
They're not.
It's not like they're this absolute wrecking ball who constantly makes the tournament. They're just not. It's not like they take all their money and they throw it into that. That's not the case. This is bad, man. This is bad. This is a bad start to the game. Or to the season, sorry.
Yeah, 15 turnovers against an opponent who's probably one of the worst defensive ones you see this year. Not having the defensive chops to, again, with Layla Blair, without Layla Blair, probably win this one with her, but you didn't have her.
It shouldn't be close.
It shouldn't have been close enough that you were a Layla Blair away from winning. You should have at least been able to find a way to win against this team, and not really changing any of the reservations or concerns we had about this program.
Yep. I don't know what else to say, man. I wish there was something else to say, but what do you say after you lose to UTRGV? And I want this to be just before I say anything else. I want this to be clear that if baseball lost to UTRGV, I'd be pissed. If softball lost to UTRGV, if swimming and diving loses, if tennis loses to UTRGV, I'm going.
They did last year, by the way.
And what happened?
It didn't end up being a good season.
Exactly. It shouldn't happen at any sport at any level. I'm sorry. It just shouldn't. There's nothing else to say.
Yeah. Cougs will be going to Georgia to play the Lady Bulldogs on Friday to face a familiar foe, Katie Abraham Henderson, the Georgia coach, who was the longtime UCF coach before that. If you remember, those UCF teams were generally a thorn in U of H's side, among the best in the AAC. Abraham Henderson's last few years there, they showed a pretty unique zone look, and it always really gave the Cougs fits. Offensively, played at a really deliberate pace as well, which Coach Abe has largely brought with her to UGA. Brought a good chunk of her UCF roster to UGA 2 seasons ago. They went to the NCAA tournament, kind of fell back to 3 SEC wins last year, but you blame me if I'm not very optimistic the Cougars will be able to do much on the road in this one.
Yeah, I don't. Especially after losing to UTRGV. I mean, I have zero expectations for this team, and anytime they win, I will be happily surprised. I love women's basketball. Like, I remember going to games when it was me and 5 other people at Hofheinz, and I remember a ref coming up to us after the game going, I turned around and I thought there would be 200 of you, and there are 6 of you in the stands here. I went to every women's basketball game when I was an undergrad. One of my favorite and first memories at U of H is women's basketball game, where
the Brandy Brown Middle Tennessee
the Brandy Brown game. She's still a friend of mine on Facebook, by the way. One of my longest Facebook friends, which is just kind of funny when you think about it. And so I just, to see it be here, and like I said last week in the preview, there's not a coach that I want to succeed more at U of H. But if we don't do something about this at the end of this season, now, if he goes to the tournament and he figures something out and we go to the tournament and we do something crazy like that, cool. I understand. But if we don't do something, we have to invest more in the sport. We need to figure something out. Then we might as well just shutter the program. At that point, just shutter the program. It's one of the most criminally underfunded programs in the Big 12. When you look at everything, the funding that we put towards women's basketball, not saying that we should be putting a ton into it, right? But at some point, you can't always blame the coach, even though I kind of do. But like at some point, we have to look and go, is this really what we're looking for here?
Yeah, the problems here are much, much, much bigger than Ronald Huey, but I think it's also fair to say that even acknowledging everything you said, don't disagree with a word of it. Probably could be getting more out of this team than you are, and losing to RGV just factually something that shouldn't happen regardless of the sport.
Yep.
A couple quick sports to catch up on briefly, or to set the table for their week to come. Wanted to mention Cougar Swimming and Diving, who actually opened their season a few weeks ago. Wanted to catch up on that. A few weeks tardy in doing this, so my apologies on that, but worth seeing how the Cougars have been doing this fall. Gonna look at the team performances and the individual ones as well. Gonna start with the team. As I mentioned, the Cougars opened their season a few weeks ago at the Rice Fall Splash on the 11th and 12th of October. Cougs won that one with a team score of 383.5 points, almost 100 points above their second place opponent, Rice. Since then, in the past 2 weeks, the Cougars have had 2 meets, at a dual meet at number 20 Texas A&M, while hosting number 13 LSU and Tulane as part of a tri-meet at U of H. Not surprisingly, lost head-to-head the dual meet at A&M and finished second to a really good LSU program in that tri-meet. Kind of a sport agnostic observation here on my part, but you generally want your early season schedule to be challenging, to really see where you're good and where you need to work, and like what events maybe you're at the weakest at, and which ones, hey, like we could really get it, podium places plural at the Big 12, what relays, combos of athletes are working, on and on and on. But going to mention the individual performances as well. Far from the only individual athlete I want to highlight, but I wanted to lead with one of your newcomers, freshman Lottie Cullen. First off, great name for a Cougar athlete. Yeah, and anyone who has like Cullen or Scott or Holman, Calhoun as well.
Calhoun's a good one.
Any U of H side streets I'm forgetting there?
Not off the top of my head. We got Scott, Cullen, Holman, Cullen. Yeah, I'm just
Maddie
trying to
Spur, Maddie Spur 5, a backstroke. Kidding. Back to the topic at hand. Lottie Cullen, incredible start to her Cougar career. Most recently in that LSU Tulane tri-meet, she swam the 5th fastest time in program history in the 200 backstroke. This time was good for an NCAA B cut. Not even her most impressive performance this fall. I just mentioned the most recent one first. She set the program record in the 100 backstroke in the A&M dual meet. Not a bad start to her Cougar career. Opposite side of the experience spectrum, super senior diver Amelia Waters. Also, really fantastic name for a swim dive athlete. Waters, just like that. Had NCAA zone cut level performance from the LSU Tulane tri-meet. Her fellow veteran Hedda Grells. I think Waters and Grells are going to be really critical on the diving side of things, where you did lose at least one impact athlete to graduation. Going to mention some other swim performances as well. Henrietta Fongli and sophomore Evelyn Entrigan both swam NCAA B cut times in the 100 breaststroke. Both those came at the A&M dual meet. And you had junior Virag Peter winning the 100 breaststroke, also at the A&M dual meet, and freshman Mariana Cote was second in the 500 freestyle at the A&M dual meet. Going to mention that as a freshman getting on the podium in any event against a program of A&M's caliber, always good, and also just bodes well for what she can do against opponents that aren't nearly as brutally difficult. And it's not a comprehensive list of performances, but just wanted to highlight some of the ones that caught my eye from the early season.
Yep.
And
excited for them. That's always one of the more solid teams on our in the athletic department.
No doubt, really consistently a good team. A team now that you have the Leviathan that is UT Austin that just has 140 something straight conference titles. You actually have a shot at that this year, which I think is pretty cool, especially for how good this program was in its last years in the American. Going to do some table setting in tennis. This is not a full tennis corner, but we'll just quickly mention that the Cougar tennis program will be competing at 2 different events in the coming week. You will have Santa Strombaja, your top singles player, competing at ITA sectionals up in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Her performance there could punch a ticket to the NCAA Fall Individual Championships, which are at the end of this month. In Waco, she will be opening against national top 100 singles player Vivian Vrotsky from UT Austin. That's actually a rematch from the quarterfinals of the ITA Texas Championship, which was earlier this fall season. Bobby was out for at least part of that. And we're going to have the first competitive event in the Houston area for this team this fall season. A number of Cougar athletes will also be competing at the Rice Invitational at the George R. Brown Convention Center. No guarantee I'll be able to, but I'm going to try and pop over there and watch the Cougs while I'm in Houston this coming weekend. So excited to have some Cougar tennis to talk about in the coming episode. And I think that is it for us, Bobby. Take us home, bud.
I wanted to talk about one more thing.
Oh, yeah, hit me. What am I forgetting? What am I forgetting?
Our blue uniforms.
Oh, shit. I didn't scroll. Actually, I have notes. We have Cougar blue uniform. Do not take us home, Bobby. Tell us about the big drop.
So we actually got to see U of H release not just football. I think that's something that we kind of should mention here, that this is what appears to be a entire athletic department initiative in bringing in, what are we calling this blue? What is the official? Because we can't go love ya.
I think it's Houston blue.
Houston blue. I think we're calling it Houston blue. I saw someone refer to it as Bayou blue. Kind of down for that. But we saw these uniforms from the football team last year, and there were some legal issues, I guess you could say, with the NFL. I was at an alumni event back in May, I want to say, and Pesman had mentioned that it was something to do with the stripes on the jersey made it like the Oilers, and that's what kind of got us into trouble. Something along those lines. I could be completely wrong here and maybe misremembering that because, it was 6 months and one divorce ago. So it's, I think they look good. My personal opinion. I like more of a darker blue if we're going to go with the blue or a royal blue, because like historically we as a university have used that color. Phi Slama Jama stuff. We haven't really used the Houston blue. I understand why we did it. It's going to connect with a lot of Houstonians that don't connect with the University of Houston. I think you've noticed on a lot of the clothing and a lot of the merchandise, it says Houston and it doesn't say the U of H logo. I'm kind of an old fuddy-duddy when it comes to that stuff. I put us in red and white, and I think I texted Sam a couple of months ago that I don't even like white U of H merchandise, just because when opponents come into the stadium, I want to see of red, because that's our color. I'm not saying that you shouldn't wear the Houston blue. I think it looks good. I think they look good. I think that I prefer red and white because that's what I love. But I totally understand, and I can appreciate that we launched it. And it's going to every sports team. It's not just football. We're going to see the blue uniforms and blue trim from what appears to be every team. I think volleyball's doing it at the next home game, if I recall.
Yep. You're right about that one.
So, Sam, go ahead. What were your thoughts on the blue uniforms?
I like them. Like them better than you. I love how well done the rollout was. Like I think that's definitely a feather in the hat of this athletic department, and just a big win to get that over the line. Because as cool and as well received as the uniforms were last year, you also had some pushback of the, okay, like these were awesome, these were cool, like loved them, and you got really positive press from like the college football world at large from how cool those uniforms were. I like that it's an athletic department wide thing as opposed to just like a one-off football thing, kind of like you said at the top. It's undeniably just a huge win for your still fairly new head of athletics, Eddie Nunez, not to flatten this all into, it's all Eddie Nunez, because a lot of people, I'm sure, spent a lot of time to bring these awesome uniforms back, and very importantly, make it so that U of H and a number of non-U of H entities can actually sell Houston blue merchandise and get that connection, which I think is important to the city at large, to get people who aren't U of H people in some way, at least connected in some way, like, oh, that's cool, like in some way connecting more with U of H than they do now. Anything that gets this fan base, or to get this school a more casual fan base in its orbit, other than the bandwagoning on basketball being good, I think is a positive. I personally, I was so excited about this rollout. I was on a bar crawl out here Halloween evening on Fremont and downtown with some friends, and I got a DM hitting us that, hey, yeah, the bookstore has this live. It was just after midnight Central, and may have ordered a Houston blue polo while I was sitting at a table on this bar crawl with my partner and some friends of ours out here. That's how excited I was to get my hands on some of that sweet merch.
Yeah, like I said, I think it looks good. I think it was a great rollout. I understand why we did it. I'm just an old fuddy-duddy when it comes to uniforms. But look, if the players are excited to wear it in any sport, if they get hype about it, that's kind of my only kind of pushback to it when I really think about it. Because like, you think about the players and we're like, oh, it means something to Houston and the Houston teams. None of these players were alive when that color was as prominent as it was in the city. So it's kind of like, I think this is more for the fan base than it is anything else, and I'm okay with that because I love that sweet merch money. And I think you can kind of tell the story of Houston through the color. And a lot of people, because the cop cars used to be that color, and so like that's a way everyone was able to connect with the city was through those cop cars, and nothing else in that city, just the cop cars. And so that was why everyone fell in love with that color scheme is the cop cars. The cops were that color. So that's all I got on the blue uniform. Sam, what else you got, buddy?
I'm good, bud. Take us home.
All right. Well, that is it for this week. We appreciate you guys listening to an hour and a half of Cougar coverage. We hope you enjoy it. Not that there's anything exciting going on in the world right now, but
No.
if you do have any feedback for us, please send it to us. You can find us on social media on Twitter at SH Podcast. That's PAWD on Twitter. On Blue Sky, you can find us at podcast.bsky.social. Again, that's podcast with the D. And if you are an old-fashioned person who wants to use email, you hate social media, you can always hit us up at shpodcast@gmail.com. Again, Sam is going to be doing post-game instant reacts to basketball this year. I'll be joining him on a couple of those schedule pending. But if you want some of that great extra content, we're still doing post-game shows for football as well. You can find us on Patreon for $5 a month minimum. If you want to do more, we will not say no to that either. And Sam, that's it. And what do we always say, buddy?
Go Cougs.
All right. Go Cougs! Let's go!